Well, good afternoon and welcome to H360 Live. My name is Dave Duplay and I'm joined here in the studio this afternoon by my friend and colleague from h360, Miss Courtland Long. Courtland, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, we've got an exciting show for everybody today. Veronica Trathen is going to be in the studio today, and she is going to be talking to us all about caregiving and the Family Resource Network, which is in New Jersey. They are doing some phenomenal work over there, and we're going to hear all about it. But before we get into the discussion with Veronica, I want to talk a little bit about caregiving and some of the alarming statistics around it. So, did you know that more than 65 million people, about 29% of the U.S. population, provide care for the chronically ill, disabled, or the aging, a family member or a friend during any given year? Those are big numbers. 20 hours per week is the average amount of time family caregivers spend for a loved one, while 13% of family caregivers are providing 40 hours of care a week or more. 14% of family caregivers care for a special needs child, with an estimated 16.8 million caring for special needs children under the age of 18 years old. 55% of those caregivers are caring for their own child. Women who are family caregivers are 2.5 times more likely than non-caregivers to live in poverty and 5 times more likely to receive supplemental income. 40 to 70% of family caregivers have clinically significant symptoms of depression, with approximately a quarter to half of these caregivers meeting the diagnostic criteria for major depression. So as you can see, this is why we want to shine the spotlight on caregiving and the great work that the Family Resource Network is doing. Veronica, it's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So you guys are extremely busy over there these days with a lot of great stuff. So I'm so glad you could take a little time away and come in and chat with us about caregiving and all the great things that you guys are doing.
Happy to.
Well, Veronica, again, thank you for joining us. We're honored not only to hear your personal story, but also to learn more about what the Family Resource Network is doing. And so, as you know, caregivers are some of the people at the heart of the Healthy O360 community, and I know that they're going to be really interested to learn more about the Family Resource Network as well. Can we have you start out by sharing with us a little bit of your background and how you got into being a caregiver?
Thank you. I've actually been at the Family Resource Network for about 19 years, and in that time frame I was more of a caretaker. I was in a paid capacity to provide direct support for caregivers, give them the break that they needed. It wasn't until later in life that caregiving directly affected me through my loved ones, my aunt and my grandmother. So, you know, my 19 years, you know, everything that I've done there really brought me into a great place to have some good insight into helping other caregivers and being able to relate to families that are going through similar experiences.
Yeah, you know, my father is a caregiver for my mother who suffers from Alzheimer's disease, so I see firsthand, you know, what he's going through. But can you share with us some of the challenges that you had as a caregiver? And I'm sure that these are challenges that others and caregivers at home can also relate to.
I would say, you know, I come from a pretty large family, and so I was very fortunate enough to have several people to help in the challenges. And you never really know until you're in it what you're going to come out victorious in the end, or if it might cause some family division because of that stress. And my one aunt actually was the live-in caregiver for my grandmother, and then all of us kind of did rotation and helping everywhere we could. It was definitely challenging for me because even though I had been in the field for so long and was able to give out resources to families, you know, all the time, now I was actually the one making the phone calls and trying to make that connection, and I did not find it to be as easy as I had thought, which really changed me, you know, professionally, to look at things different when I was working with families in the same spot as I was now. So that was very challenging to be on the other side and to have the lack of resources available depending on the community you lived in or your financial resources available.
Mm-hmm.
So those were some of the challenges.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, trying to coordinate with all the people and a large family. And now there's apps out there that can help you do that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank God, because I think my family really struggled with trying to get any kind of outside help. We thought we could all just handle it ourselves, and ultimately, I think in a large part we did. Trying to reach out for another resource when you're already tapped with all the other issues going on with your loved one, the last thing you want to do is have to reach out to someone else and fill out more paperwork and make more phone calls. And so, I could definitely sympathize more with families that were going through it.
Yeah.
So Veronica, caregiving is an interesting career choice for someone sort of starting out in their career. So I'm interested to learn why is it that you felt compelled to get into this field when you were first starting?
It really fell into my lap, and I feel like I was spent a lot of time growing up in my grandmother's home. My mom was a single mom. We lived with my grandmother. My grandmother was caring for a cousin with mental illness, and so even though it was kind of there in front of me all along, and naturally it was something I picked up, I didn't really look at it until many years later to how involved my grandmother was in the community and our church, and the fact that she was caring for a cousin, all her day-to-day or daily needs. And even into high school, there was a young man who was visually impaired, and I did admire him from a distance because he maneuvered the hallways of our classrooms and our schools without any assistance. And at some point they had asked me if I would assist him in the classroom, taking tests and some things that he needed academically. And so all along I was kind of put into some positions that I thought brought me here. That at the time I really did good because it made me feel good. It had nothing to do with thinking this was going to be a career choice or and then just seeing the example of my own family and what they were doing, I'm not surprised at all that this is where I landed, for my career.
This question is something that I always think about, and it's kind of a two-part question. So I want you to complete the sentence.
Okay.
Okay. So the first part is caregivers are. The second part is caregiving is. So caregivers are
Resilient. People that have hopes and dreams of their own. Caregivers are undercompensated, underemployed. Caregiving is rewarding, a deep commitment to your loved one, and definitely humbling. Caregiving gives you a different appreciation for life.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those words. It's frustrating. Sometimes I see caregivers and I look at my family situation as one. You say caregivers they're unselfish. I see so many caregivers that just back burner their life, their health, we always try to say if you have to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of somebody else in the best possible way. And we get calls and emails from so many caregivers that are on the verge of caregiving burnout and want to know, what resources are available, where can I go, who can I speak with, what other caregivers are there that can sympathize with me. And I see from afar my situation with my father, but I can't really put myself in his shoes because I'm not there day in and day out caring for my mother like he is. So it's important that we build awareness of where these folks, number one, what they need to do in terms of respite and caring for themselves, and where they can go to find that kind of support.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Veronica, a little earlier you shared with us some of the challenges that you and your family face throughout your roles as being familial caregivers. So can you also share with us maybe what some impactful lessons were that you learned or you feel your family learned?
Yeah. I have to say, as far as lessons learned professionally, it has made me not so easy to just give out a phone number. I'm really kind of checking my own resources to see that they're viable, because I really don't want to send somebody on a wild goose chase to end up right back calling me again, or maybe just giving up entirely. And so that's definitely given me some professional perspective. Personally, I think it's made me a better mother. I think it's made me a better person. We often get calls from families who are stressed out and angry, and I think a lot of people, they run in fear of that. Oh, the mom's on the phone that's really upset, who wants to talk to her, right? I actually think that that's the perfect person that I want to talk to, because there's more going on there than just an angry mom on the phone, or aunt or grandmother. There's somebody who's lost in a system that needs some additional help, and that's exactly what I do. So I kind of take that as a welcome challenge, and so it's made me better, absolutely, professionally and personally.
Caregiving is certainly a sacrifice in a lot of ways. And what sacrifices do you see when you talk to people? Are there some that jump right out at you? What kind of sacrifices do you see people making as kind of a caregiver and putting that person first?
I guess the number one thing I hear and have experienced is not being able to go to work. You and I get up every day and we go to work and we do our 9 to 5, and we go home and we might jump into our regular routine. If you have somebody at home that you need to take care of, and you're going out the door and it's 8:45 and they fell out of bed, and the home health aide didn't show up that day, your day takes a whole different kind of turn when you're the caregiver. Everything else has to be put secondary, and your family member has to come first. So you're calling out of work. That means loss of wages. That means that it affects your life outside of just that. Who's going to pay the bills? I mean, the reality is that your family member has to come first, and I do see people's employment sort of becoming secondary to that, and no matter what the cost.
Yeah. I feel very fortunate. My hours are usually 6 to 10, a little reversed, because I, in a way, feel like I'm caregiving for the members of our community here. When people call or email me, it's not something that we here take lightly. It's not just a job for us to be here and provide support. It's every person that touches us in some way is like, somebody that we're caring for. So I can definitely see what you mean.
And this is, yes, it's my full-time job, but you don't really go home and shut it off. It's not.
Exactly.
You never do.
Yeah.
We're always available and on call and getting emails and after hours.
Yeah.
Because somebody else's life is still happening. They don't just happen between 9 and 5 every day.
Good point.
Well, Veronica, I want to bring it back to something that we just touched on, and when you answered about lessons that you learned, you felt like being a caregiver has made you a better mother. Can you expand on that a little bit, and maybe also talk a little bit about how do you deal with those angry mothers and aunts and grandmothers? Interesting that they're all women also.
That is interesting. That is a good point. Very good point. It's rare. It's rare that I'm talking to a father or a grandfather. Some sons, as they're getting older, taking care of their sisters, or brothers. But I don't know. I think as a mom, I think everything comes full circle for sure. So not to make any jokes, but I'm going to take really good care of them. So one day they'll take good care of me. So you got to definitely think about that. But things like, having respect or dignity, preserving dignity, no matter how old your child is, or if you're taking care of an older child or an older parent, that you preserve their dignity at all costs. And so you definitely look at things so differently. And I talk about my role as a mom, but as a friend, as a coworker, everybody's got something going on in their lives, and you just got to take a step back and have some perspective about it, and not judge or jump to conclusions. And dealing with somebody who's really frustrated, I often try to think of how I would want to be dealt with if I was really frustrated. And sometimes when somebody's, completely talking over me, they think they know more than me, doesn't work for me. And I think a lot of times somebody just wants someone to listen. And most importantly, they want somebody who's going to follow back up when they say that they're going to follow back up, provide resources that are reliable and, not a number that's going to lead to, voicemail land and you'll never get a phone call back. So just, following through, being reliable, being a good listener, basic human, nature.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting as I look now, there's this whole new classification called the sandwich generation, right? So you talk about piling stress on top of stress, right? And the sandwich generation, for those of you watching who don't know, are people who have parents that are of the age that are starting to be cared for, as well as having children at home that you're also caring for. So you're kind of sandwiched in the middle of an elderly parent who needs care and a child at home that needs care. And so I can just imagine that the mounting stress that we're seeing, in this generation.
And that's exactly the dynamics within my own family. It's, my aunts and my uncle who were taking care of, and grandchildren too, taking care of my grandmother. And then, also some younger children in the family. And then on top of it, my one aunt also has some disabilities herself. And so you throw that in the mix. And then even as of recent, the doctors, right before my grandmother passed away, were saying my grandfather was showing some signs of Alzheimer's as well. So it only, compacted the issue.
Yeah. Well, what are some tips? We talk about impact that caregiving has on an individual, whether it's emotional or spiritual or physical. What are some of the tips that you might offer, or what are maybe an early warning sign, if you will, that a caregiver can step back and say, wow, okay, I better, my antenna's gone up now, I better think about things just a little differently?
I think it really depends on how circumstance sort of falls in your lap. I was just speaking with my mother about this last night. When something urgent comes up, almost like an EMT, you jump in and you do it because it was thrown upon you. Something like Alzheimer's, for example, it kind of creeps up on you. It's kind of there, and then all of a sudden you're there, you're in it. You don't even know how you got there, but you are doing all these things. And I have to say, I think it's important that the people around you, you have a good support system to be able to help you recognize when you can't see you're drowning. I think my aunts were very good for my aunt who's taking care of my grandmother, primarily to recognize that for her and to provide some breaks and respite for her. Go on vacation for a weekend. We're all gonna, we're gonna cover it. So having a good support system to help you be able to recognize and check yourself, because it's very hard to recognize that you need the help often until it's too late. Everybody starts off having their own hopes and dreams, and it's so hard sometimes to hold on to that. But I think it's still got to be in the forefront, because like you had said earlier, you're really no good to somebody else if you can't take care of yourself. I mean, if you put yourself in such a position that your own health becomes an issue, and there's nobody else to care for your family member, ultimately it's really done the whole situation a disservice.
Yeah.
So we at Family Resource Network, we do things like we do a women's retreat. Is an opportunity because it is a large female caretaking situation. So we bring a lot of the females in, and they get together, and we do like yoga and like positive, uplifting, speakers come in, and massages, and like almost a pampering day for the caregiver. And it's only a small thing that we can offer, but those small things really can mean a lot when you just need an hour break or a cup of coffee with some girlfriends.
Right.
Yeah.
So in talking about you sort of slipping into this role without realizing it, in an earlier conversation with us, you had said, I think a lot of people can fall into this selfless role and likely not even realize it, just like myself. And you mentioned people around you being a support system and realizing that maybe you're drowning when you don't really think about it. For myself, I know if I were in that role, I would get a little defensive if someone told me, hey, go take a break, So how can your support system be there and support you and suggest that you take a break without, sort of getting your fur riled up in
Well,
the back?
it's funny that you said that, because we certainly had some ups and downs in the family trying to address that exactly has come up. And I think at some point we took a different approach to it. Instead of being like, you need to take a break, we started saying things like every Tuesday, Aunt Robin is going to go take Mom for the day out to the diner, and they're going to go do this because she wants to spend time with Mom, versus let me take that away from you when that doesn't feel so good when someone says that. So I feel like we try to place it in a positive light instead of a negative for my aunt, who was really experiencing a lot of stress from the situation.
So you talked about this this little respite, getting out, the retreat that you just spoke of. What are some of the other services that the Family Resource Network can provide?
So, I've talked a lot about Alzheimer's specifically because that's what has affected my family. But professionally, the Family Resource Network provides a lot of caregiving support to parents who have children or adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so those supports really focus around in-home respite, could be a home health agency type service, could be helping them to build life skills, getting them out in the community, getting involved in social events, taking them to the museums and getting some culture. We also do after-school programs for children with special needs, specifically autism. We do sibling programs as well. Often siblings feel lost in the shuffle of things when they have a sibling with a disability, because everything's always focused on the child with the disability. And so we've created a program to help them. And we have a great Get Fit program. People with developmental disabilities often don't get the exercise and the nutritional education that they need. So we try to incorporate that in a lot of the services that we provide. But very specifically, we have a service around that where you can get personal trainers to work with people who might have some physical limitations and even cognitive abilities that need things modified a bit. And then certainly the camp that I've been running for the last 19 years is a big thing that I love to do, and a great service for families who want a week-long respite or break. So.
And what's that camp?
It's a 1-week overnight camp for children and adults with developmental disabilities ages 12 and up. And we really do, it's a very typical camp experience, boating, fishing, swimming, hiking, and we modify the activities according to the abilities of our campers. And over the years I've seen some amazing things happen. We had one camper, he's got cerebral palsy, so he has some limitations physically, and his mom was like, oh, he'll never do the zip line. And when the zip line is a lot of stairs to get up there, you get harnessed and you have to go across. And believe it or not, with only use of really the right side of his body, he was able to get up all those steps and zip line across. We videotaped it. His mom was, she was just in awe. She cried because she couldn't believe that we had challenged him to do it. And he's been coming ever since, and he does it every year. So now it's like, nothing for him. But
that's so exciting for him.
Yeah.
So we sort of glazed over it a little bit in the beginning when we were talking about your career, but how did you find the Family Resource Network and get involved? And then in addition to the camp, what all do you do there?
To be honest, I was a young mom and I was looking for a job, and they happened to have an opening, and it was for doing direct care for a gentleman with autism. And I started doing it, and I loved it. I mean, I was already a mom, so I thought to myself, caring for somebody else, I mean, I could do this. And I loved it so much that I started doing more with them, getting involved in any fundraiser, events, anything I could get. At the time I was very young too, so I was hungry for to get involved in anything, and loved it so much that before I knew it, I was running one program and then two programs, and then over time I now supervise all our programs statewide.
Wow, amazing. So how can we find you?
Certainly we're on Facebook, but
Yeah.
our website address is thefamilyresourcenetwork.org. And just one thing I wanted to touch on, we are doing community impact boards related to caregiving, and we've already started them, particularly in Bergen and Salem County, which is north and very south of Jersey. But we're definitely looking for more caregivers to get involved and help us branch out to do more around caregiving.
And if somebody wants to volunteer,
We have a whole volunteer department at the Family Resource Network. It is found on our website. We have a tab that you hit for volunteers, and we have a great volunteer base for our camp. That seems to be one of the things that really touch people because they get to see. But we have lots of volunteer opportunities. As you know, our beach bash, which we do every year, is huge on volunteers. I don't know how we would do the event without volunteers.
yeah. Well, before I let Courtland ask the last question, tell us about the Beach Bash, because I go every year, and it is without a doubt my favorite event. So share with our viewers a little bit about what they're going to see when they come to the Beach Bash this year.
Well, first I can tell you, any pictures that you see on the website will just not capture it. So you do definitely have to come to the event to get exactly what you and I are talking about. On the beach, they have professional surfers that come, and literally people sign up, their children with disabilities, to be able to go on the beach and surf with a professional surfer. So the entire beach of Belmar is lined up with surfboards and surfers, and the kids literally going out there and coming in, and there's thousands of people. It's a very family-oriented event. Lots of things for the kids to do, the entire family, not just the child with the disability. Food, games, a lot of information available from other agencies that provide similar services that we do. But it's an amazing experience.
Yeah, the best day of the year.
Yes.
Not only are there food and games, but there's also candy at our tent. Maybe you're not supposed to know that, I'm sure. Well, Veronica, before we close, do you have any sort of closing remarks or advice that you'd like to give to any of the caregivers that are at home watching this?
Sure. Actually, I was speaking with my family last night just in preparation for being here today, and one of the things I said to my mother and my aunt was, my grandmother, she passed away a little over a year ago, and now they're not in the stress of things anymore. So, I'm challenging them to figure out what can you do now for somebody who was in a situation like we were. And I think now that they've been through it, that there's a lot that they can share with somebody who's already been through it. So there's value in having gone through that tough road. And even if, we didn't have all the resources that we might have needed at the time, there's somebody out there we could save one step down that rocky road to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, Veronica, we greatly admire all the work that you and your colleagues do, and thank you so much for that. And I'd like to, again, thank you for taking time to come in and spend with us today to talk about everything that's going on and all the great services that the Family Resource Network can provide. I'd like to thank our viewers for tuning in, and I'd like to thank our sponsors for making it all possible. Remember, all of our episodes can be viewed on demand at healthyho360.com, and our podcast can be found in the iTunes Store.
Well, we love social media, and we're all over Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest using the hashtag #RealStories when posting, and we greatly appreciate it if you would do the same. On behalf of Dave Duplay, myself, and the entire HealthyO360 family, we'd like to thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week when we're chatting with Dr. Bean from Health First.